Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Plus Acumen Learning Lab today. I am very excited to welcome you to this lab called Brand Thinking for Change. And we have our wonderful guest, Anne Miltenberg, founder of The Brandling today, who's sharing her strategies and tips and examples to help you think more like a brand strategist so that you can grow your reach and your impact and grow your business. So my name is Danielle Sutton, and I am the content animator with Plus Acumen. If you aren't familiar with Plus Acumen already, we are the world's school for social change, and we offer over 30 free and low-cost courses for social entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs and change makers like yourselves. Our courses have been taken by over 450,000 change makers around the world, so we're so excited that you're here for this shorter learning opportunity with us and with Anne today. We also have a masterclass bundle that we just released yesterday, which is all about startup essentials, and it includes some branding information. So I'll share more about that at the end of the webinar, at the end of the lab today. And also Anne has some special treats and bonuses for you guys being on the lab today with that she'll share more about, and we'll also send all of that information in your replay link with the recording. So just to let you know, it will be recorded and you will be able to access this information again. So you can definitely take notes, but just know that you'll be able to refer back to things and get your hands on some of the links and opportunities that we're talking about today. So as I mentioned, we're so excited to welcome Anne. So Anne is the founder of The Brandling, and Anne has over 15 years experience building brands, which is amazing. She's educated as a designer at the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in the Netherlands and became a creative director and brand strategist with several renowned agencies, including Interbrand, and has worked across Europe and Southeast Asia and is now based in Nairobi. So we have a true global citizen here today. In 2014, Anne left the agency world to start The Brandling and train changemakers to build stronger brands. In the past 5 years, she's worked with over 1,400 social entrepreneurs to help clarify their offer, position themselves in the market, and build and grow their brand. So that's what we're going to dive into today. And you're also the author of Brand the Change, which is a book that goes into all of these ideas in more detail as well. So today we are going to learn to think like a brand strategist. And to structure our session, first, please, as you guys are doing already, introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know where you're joining from. And if you want to share your organization and your mission, do that as well. And also, as we go through the presentation, please input your questions. You can actually mark them as a question, and that will help us keep track of them so that at the end of the presentation, we can have Anne answer your questions and we can dive into some examples from you guys who are here with us and answer any of your questions about branding. But I think we have a lot to learn, so I won't keep us any longer than that, and I will pass it over to Anne to kick us off.
Cool. Thanks, Danielle. It's so exciting to be with you guys tonight. It's 6 p.m. here in Nairobi, and I'm seeing a lot of different names in the chat pop up, a lot of different locations. So I'm grateful to some of you who probably got up really early or are staying up late to watch this talk. So thanks. It's always great to be among Acumen people. Or the people that Acumen tracks, because it means that you are the people who are putting in the really hard work, kind of the blood, sweat, and tears to make social and environmental change happen in the world. So I couldn't be more excited, because you are the kind of people that I work with on a daily basis and that I love to work with, because we so desperately need some of the change that you guys are working on. Maybe Danielle, if you can start my slides.
Yes, so they somehow disappeared on me, so I'm just reloading them. So they are coming.
No,
sorry about that.
Cool. So one of the things that that I think is really interesting when I meet people like yourself is that you're building amazing ideas, products, services for social or environmental causes. And as a brand developer, my professional deformation is, of course, to ask as one of the first questions, what's your brand strategy? And I think, interestingly enough, that always stops people a little bit in their tracks. And it makes it a little bit, you can tell that this is usually not people's comfort zone. So they, everyone's investing a lot of time in obviously crafting that idea and the product and the service, and they're thinking a lot about how the world's going to look like once that, idea is implemented and once that change starts to show. But kind of in the middle between that, the product and the change that you want to see happen, there's this blank spot, and the blank spot is where the strategy needs to go, and that's what I'm here to talk to you guys about. I think branding and marketing generally don't get so much attention in the process of creating change, because it doesn't necessarily have the best reputation, and I think that needs to change, which is a big part of my mission. And so this cartoon by Sydney Harris, I think is a very good visualization, actually, of some of those conversations that I have with people. You have your product, your idea, you have your vision for the world, and how it's going to get out there to people is usually the last part of the plan that needs to be defined. And so there's a lot of wishful thinking. I think there's a lot of hope that something will spread, assumptions that your friends will tell their friends, and they will tell their friends. There's a lot of vague expectations, maybe, that your website will be found or that a video will go viral. But unfortunately, very few times that actually happens. So it's really my purpose to tell you that hope is not a brand strategy, and that I'm hopefully here to help you to be more deliberate, confident, strategic and creative about how you're going to present your idea for change to the world, and really get that audience that you deserve. Because if you don't get that audience, the change won't happen. So in that sense, I believe that branding and marketing are really crucial to the change-making process. I'm just going to dive in. I'll tell a little bit more about myself later on. But I just wanted to check with you guys, and I think looking at the chat, you guys are quite active. So I'd like to ask you maybe to share some of your ideas in the chat about what branding is for you. So what would you say your definition of branding is? I think it's good to start off with that as a group, because there's so many different ways that you could look at this topic. And maybe some of you just want to share something off the top of your head, like when I give you the word branding, what comes to mind? There's no such thing as a wrong answer, so feel free to leave a word or a sentence on what you think branding is. Oh, we're getting so many introductions.
Yes, and tons of answers to your question. This is great.
Oh, cool. I guess there's so many that...
Yeah, I can read a couple off for as you don't worry about getting your grounding in the chat, because it's going really fast. Branding is a gut feeling. Branding is the face we present to the market and the world. It's a North Star that guides the organization. It's what everyone else thinks of my organization. It's how you present yourself to the world and how you're recognized. A management tool, deliberate differentiation, reputation, top of mind in audiences. Those are a few of the ideas. Lots coming in.
Cool. Okay, well, you guys are already totally on top of it. I don't need to. I can just stop this call right now. No, so I think those are all really, really good definitions, smart definitions, intelligent definitions. So I think they're important because it really shows on what level you're thinking about branding. The definition that we use at the Brandling is directing how other people think and feel about you. So it's an activity, the activity of brand thinking, the activity of thinking like a brand strategist to advance your ideas for change. And that directing is really important because that word really implies that you're being active, you're being proactive and deliberate about how you want others to perceive you. And that's incredibly important because, as you know, people get thousands of messages thrown at them every day. And so in that world of messages and things that they're picking up, signals all around them, they're going to get different signals. Hopefully, in the worst case, they're not getting any signals at all. But if they are getting signals, then it's going to come through a lot of different avenues. So it might be through a conversation with a team member. It might be through using your product or service, reading an article in the newspaper, getting a recommendation from a friend. And so people are building this archive of associations where, which can sometimes feel like that's very hard to control, but actually there's a method to really being proactive about what signals people are getting in order for them to prefer you over others or to support you on your road to change. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I think it's also important to state that we don't see brand as a kind of layer on top of your organization. We really see it as being embedded. So brand is really the kind of the vehicle for your purpose and everything that you're about and how that drives all the different elements of your organization. So both from, for instance, how you source materials for products or how you hire people, how you communicate, the product and service itself, the different events that you might be developing. And so having them integrated is extremely important. There shouldn't really be a separate brand department. Everybody inside an organization should be living the brand. Another thing that I want to stress is that branding is not cosmetics surgery. So if you are not aligning actions with communication, then you're not going to create the right recognition because people are not fools. So again, the ability to get action and communication both aligned in order to build that belief is really important. So if you are, for instance, the brand manager of an organization, being best friends with the person who develops, for instance, the product or service is really important because if you don't have those two integrated with each other, it's going to be really, really hard to get the effect that you're hoping for. So first of all, if you're going to be investing some of your time and potentially your money in your brand, then you need to know in advance what's going to help you achieve. Is it actually going to help you achieve that change that you want to see? So over the past few years, what I've noticed is there's basically 8 different ways that branding can really help you, apart from, of course, growing your audience. And I think the first and foremost, especially for people who are in the early stage of creating a venture, is that branding is really a process of editing. In a way that the editor helps an author to write a better book by, taking the best pieces, leaving some things out, killing your darlings, etc. Branding really helps to strengthen and specify your concepts for change, which is incredibly important. It helps you stand out from the crowd. Hopefully, when you do your job well, what this does is it helps people to have preference for you and to be loyal to you and choose you time and time again beyond reason in a way. And also what I really love personally and what I see work for myself all the time, that if you have a strong brand, it really gives you direction for the future. So it can kind of become a little bit of a North Star, if you will. Another thing that I see, which is incredibly important for social impact organizations, is that they get really good people on their team. And often you don't have the big budgets to pay those people. And so having a stronger brand means that you could get the best of the talent that's out there, potentially work for you within the limits of your budget. A brand is also an asset in the book. So in terms of investment, that can be really important. And a stronger brand will help you build strategic partnerships. In the Netherlands, we say elephants talk to elephants. So if you present yourself with a strong brand, that also enables you to connect to partners who do the same. And last but not least, if you're, for instance, thinking of branding for yourself more as an activist maybe, or a writer, or an artist, a creative, it can help you to make your expertise wanted more in a personal branding sense. So these are 8 ways that thinking like a brand strategist could really help you in the future. And I hope that you'll experience that once you start putting the time in. A little bit about me. So my name is Anne Miltenberg. I'm originally from the Netherlands. As Danielle said, I've lived and worked in a lot of different places across the world, and have been in Kenya for about 4 years now. I was educated as a designer and actually graduated on a project for visual illiteracy in non-Western countries, and did my research in Mali in Africa. But was quite disillusioned with some of the practices that I saw on the ground for social change, and decided that maybe that world wasn't for me. And I got a job offer from an amazing brand agency, and I decided to take it. So I've worked for quite big brand agencies for commercial clients, but also NGOs and cultural clients, and I really enjoyed that. But after about 12 years, decided that wasn't enough for me. I wanted more purpose in my life, which I'd missed, and which I had been so important to me while I was studying to be a designer. And so about 5 years ago, I sold my house, I packed up my stuff, and I basically went on a tour to figure out how can branding help support ideas for change in the world. So spoke to a huge amount of people. I think it started in Zambia, Tunisia, the Netherlands, Saudi Arabia, the US, and Kenya, about speaking to different social entrepreneurs and what were the challenges that they were facing when it came to building their brands. Started doing some consultancy, but realizing like, I can work with these organizations for a short period of time, but what do you do when you walk out? The knowledge doesn't stay. So I realized that what we need in the world is actually democratization of really high quality knowledge around branding for social change. And so I went on this journey of discovering what is the best way to do that. And so in the past 5 years, I've built a company called The Brandling, which is an education company. What we do is we create content all about strong brands for social change, best practices, case studies, training methods, tools. We have a book called Brand the Change Out, and we've worked with over 2,000 people now across the world, which is really exciting. And I've seen a real community starting to exist around this topic, which is really a privilege. So now I'd love to hear about you, because obviously this format is amazing because we're hanging out with hundreds of people, but unfortunately I can't see all of your faces and hear all of your individual stories. But Danielle will share a few quick polls with you to see who we have in the audience. So if you are a social entrepreneur, if you work for an NGO or charity, if you're in small business, if you're a creative, I'd love to know. Obviously, I built this presentation also to get a little bit of everything for everyone in the group. But it'd be good also to know exactly what the composition is tonight.
It's amazing to see the numbers wiggle around their averages, but it looks like this is pretty much the split that we have. Can you see the results, Anne?
Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
Great.
It's like a horse race. We have a few corporates too. Cool, welcome. Okay, so we have a pretty even race. So we have social enterprise, we have people from nonprofits, governmental organization, we have creative industry, we have some corporate. That's really cool. Okay, so I'm going to try and give you guys a little bit of examples from all your different worlds, because I know that relevant examples are really important to inspire your learning. Another thing that would be interesting to know is at what stage are you? If you're developing a concept for change, are you still kind of in the idea stage, you're exploring, or are you in the startup phase where actually, you know, you're building the product, you're growing the service? Or would you say you're growing? Cool. Little bit of everything again. Wow. Okay, good. Lots of people who have a first idea. That's very exciting. Lots of people who are in the startup stage, who are growing, and a few people struggling, which can be really at any stage that you see there above. Cool, really good to know. I'll take all this information into account. And for those who are struggling, I know that everyone in this group feels your pain and commiserates. So yeah, sending you lots of love and hope and support that that this talk will somehow, you know, give you a little extra ammunition to get through your struggles. So what are specific brand challenges that some of you might be facing, whether that is whether you're in idea stage or in the scaling stage? So the first thing that people always mention to me when I ask them that, like, what are your brand challenges? They'll say, well, I don't have any brand challenges because I don't have money for branding. And of course, I think that's fair enough. Because we set these huge goals and then we have these tiny budgets to get there. I also believe that branding is really important, but it's almost never urgent. So getting the money out of a tight budget in order to set aside for that type of work is not always condoned by everyone on the team. But I think most importantly, people really see branding and marketing as overheads, like things that shouldn't be necessary, because we're doing that wishful thinking. We're doing that thing where we're hoping that things will just kind of automatically spread because, you know, our product or service is so good. And I'll get back to this point later in the practical steps that I'll share with you that I think you can take. The other issue that you have, if you're in the social impact space, very often you're creating something that's entirely new. And something that's entirely new is inherently really, really difficult to create a brand for, because it takes a lot of creativity and a lot of work to, you know, copywriting, designing, to make something tangible. So whether you're creating new material or you have maybe a new educational methodology, or you create a whole new genre of games, this isn't yet in people's frame of reference. So you're going to have to put in a lot of effort to help people understand what it is that you do, and to place that somewhere in their network of associations. Another thing that I think is really important that we don't talk about so much is that very often social enterprises don't start with a consumer insight. So if you're a traditional business, generally what happens is that you notice, you have this aha moment, you see a problem for a group of people. Like, you know, I need to get fit, but I'm working from 9 to 6. I have time to go to gym. Some smart aleck decides, okay, well, let's develop a product or service to address it, which could be, you know, a 24-hour gym. And then you're going to market that 24-hour gym to the people who had the problem to begin with. But what's very interesting when it comes to social impact ventures is that this isn't so straightforward with us. So what happens with social enterprise often is that you see a problem in the world, and then you're thinking, okay, what is a product or service that I can develop that might address that problem? And then you're going to find an audience to sell it to, but that audience isn't necessarily connected to the problem in their point of view. So let's say, for instance, that you see a problem of overpopulation, and you are developing, for instance, a really cool family planning app that's going to help people make better decisions around family planning. Now, if you take that story and you take it to a group of people, they're not necessarily going to relate to your story about overpopulation, right? So you're going to have to redo the work in terms of creating a customer insight that might lead people to pick up the product and service. So less straightforward than a traditional venture. Another issue is crowded space. For instance, when you look at charities or NGOs, there's a lot of organizations out there all working on the same issues. And what you see is that there's very little strategic positioning. There's lots of conventions, and a lot of, unfortunately, through branding and communication, we're also enforcing a lot of negative stereotypes that exist, especially and particularly about low-income countries, that really we shouldn't be enforcing anymore, in the year 2017. And being put in charge of branding and marketing for an organization in space can just really put these huge creative challenges on your shoulder with very few resources. Those are just really tough challenges. So to the main point of the story is, how are you going to build your brand? Now, as Danielle explained to you, I created an entire book about this topic, and it's always quite a challenge for me. Like, how do I take the 260 pages, I don't even know, and make them into a short presentation, a few quick takeaways that people can get started with. So I just want to go back to what I started the presentation with, which is branding is directing how other people think and feel about you. And that sounds a little bit intangible, like that feels like some kind of spin doctory, mystical thing that you would need to embark on. So I'm going to make it very practical, actually. I'm going to hereby promote you to Chief Branding Officer of whatever concept for change you're working on. And in that capacity, I see 5 main responsibilities that I think are extremely important, and I've tried to describe them as easy as I can. They all sound very simple. They all are quite hard. The first step is to make the what crystal clear. Then to really understand profoundly who you compete with. To know what matters to your audience. To create a really solid brand framework that you can fall back on time and time again, and that really guides those actions and those communications. And last but not least, to find the most effective and efficient channels to grow the brand over time. Now I'm going to take all these 5 of these and dive into them. Starting with number 1, make the what crystal clear. So very often within the social impact space, everyone talks about leading with why. We know the golden circle concept. We're always told that people will, people come to you for your purpose. And I am not disagreeing with that. The only thing that I can tell you is, after having worked with 1,400 people one-on-one in the past few years, it's very often a lack of a clear what you offer that actually is the problem with the brand that you're trying to create. And I've just taken a few examples of some what's from organizations out there creating change. So straight from their website, you might recognize them. I've anonymized them a little bit. We are X, a sustainability crucible for cradle-to-cradle concepts and circular economy research, enabling environmental activists to empower communities. This is one that always gets the most laughs during our trainings. But obviously, when you see a sentence like this, a few things happen, at least in my head, is I'm deeply trying to make sense of what I'm reading. So I'm deconstructing the jargon. I think I have a sense. I have some empathy for the people who wrote this. So I'm trying to figure out, am I their audience? Is this something that I need, etc. If people need to go through that amount of reasoning in order to figure it out, they need to really already be invested in you. And so I think in a world where people basically have an 8-second attention span, that is just going to be really, really tough. How about this one then? A big organization, quite well known. describes what they do as supporting social entrepreneurs who are leading and collaborating with change makers in a team of teams model that addresses the fluidity of a rapidly evolving society. So imagine being the chief branding officer with this statement of what you're trying to sell. I mean, I would be mortified. I wouldn't know where to start. It's so complicated. The only thing that's clear to me is the first part, which is supporting social entrepreneurs. I don't know if any of you guys out there know which organization this is, but I hope I'm not insulting anyone, actually. So let's look at a little bit more clear example. Involved in capacity building through art. Certainly less words, certainly less jargon, but I still don't know what I have to say yes to. I don't know if you guys know the TV show Say Yes to the Dress. I don't know how far that has spread across the world, but I always use that metaphor of like, is this something I can say yes to? I still don't know what I'm buying and if it's for me. I don't know if this is a 1 hour workshop. I don't know if this is for children. I don't know if it's for adults. I don't know if it's a bachelor program. I have absolutely no clue. So let's look at some examples of what that I think are really well done. Peak Vision, professional eye exams from your smartphone. Clear. Client Earth, law services for environmental activists. Tribe Wanted, off-grid community tourism experiences in Africa, Asia, and Europe. Factory 45, an online incubator for sustainable fashion companies. So you might be looking at this like, oh, but on it, like this is totally obvious. Like, why don't people know that it's really important to have a clear product? But this is the problem that I run in time and time again when people come into our trainings. And after 5 minutes, I still don't know what it is that they do. So if you are in the situation where your what is already super clear, great, move on to step number 2. But if it's not, I really recommend you to put in the time and effort that you need in order to create something that's really simple and straightforward, that you can tell someone in an elevator that they understand within, a couple of seconds, okay, this is what they do. And one way of achieving that, which I really love, is through building your brand not for an audience, but building a brand with your audience. And a good example of that is Dr. Ayana Johnson, who is one of the change makers I was extremely fortunate to speak to for the book. She's a marine biologist, and she works on policy change for ocean conservation. And she crafted this statement, using the ocean without using it up, as an anchor for her work in trying to achieve, for instance, policy change in the Caribbean, and to convince both policymakers and government and the fishermen of these islands that conservation is not just for cuddling, is not about cuddling dolphins. It's actually about ensuring that you will have a livelihood, not just tomorrow, but also in 20 years. And in our conversation, it became so clear that it's important, incredibly important, if not crucial, that the people that you're trying to influence really understand every single word of the basic principles that you're trying to get across. So if you work in this space, you want to learn more about crafting simpler messaging, then I would highly recommend reading the interview with Dr. Ayana Johnson. Because I believe that if people don't know what it is that you're offering, they're also never gonna be able to buy into the why, into your purpose, and you're also not going to be able to make that purpose happen. So if environmental activists don't understand that you are a law firm that specializes in helping them with potential legal struggles, then also no one is going to help, no one is going to understand that you're a group of activist lawyers and that you're really fighting to create a healthier planet. If everyone wants to, of course, eradicate preventable blindness, but unless a doctor in Afghanistan understands that just with using his own smartphone, he could be diagnosing patients and doing professional eye exams with his own smartphone, only when people understand that they can take action on the thing, the idea, the product and service that you're offering, only then can you begin to create that change? So seems simple, is hard. Step 2, understanding the competition. So very often during trainings, hands are raised and people say like, oh yeah, but we don't have competition. What we do, it doesn't exist yet, or there's no one else who does what we do. Or people kind of, are not so comfortable with the idea of competition because we should all be collaborating. Those are interesting conversations, but in my point of view, we all compete for something. We compete for time, we compete for attention, we can compete for money, whether that's a customer purchase or, for instance, a grant that you're competing for. We all at some point compete. And if you don't understand who you're competing with and how you're positioned towards that competition, you have a really uphill battle to fight, because it's really great when you walk into the door, wherever that is, that you already have people who are rooting for your team, because they understand what you do, they understand what the benefit of that is, and they understand how you're set apart from the other choices that they have. Because that's really what happens, I think, in the human brain. We all make choices every day, whether you go to the supermarket or you're in a restaurant, or you're looking at 10 bids for organizations doing, for instance, an educational program for you. We compare people and we look at, what do I know of that person or that organization, and you draw from that archive that you have in your brain, the associations that you have about them. And so you better have worked on creating the right associations there, and positioning is really important. So questions that are important when it comes to positioning are, who is your most important audience? What do you compete for amongst those people? What does that market look like? And how will you position yourself there and stand out? Now, just as an example from the NGO charity world, let's look, for instance, at Macmillan Cancer Support. This is a UK charity. Now, about 12 years ago, they did a really big rebranding, and they documented all of this work, which was amazing, and they've definitely helped us a lot, creating a really good case study for the book. Macmillan Cancer Support was in trouble. They were no longer getting as many donations as they had in the past. They had the wrong reputation. And so they did a new study to see, where do we fit in? So they knew that they needed donors to consider them. There are a lot of people out there who obviously want to donate to good causes. So they knew that in the UK they were competing with some quite big brand names in terms of other charities, but they also knew that they wanted to matter primarily to people who wanted to make a difference to the topic of cancer. And so they looked at all the different organizations working in that field and realized that we have people who are working on curing cancer. That's not what we do. That's not what we're good at. We're, of course, helping to fund some of that research, but it's not our core competency. Then there's organizations that do end-of-life care. That's a part of what we do, but it's also not what we're best at. And so they decided to focus completely on people living with cancer and supporting them in the best possible way. And I think that is a really important positioning, because that leads both how you develop all the products and services for people living with cancer. It says something about the communication that you're putting out there for people. It serves as a really good guiding force for, being a force for life and being a positive source of support. And that really helps them to stand out within all of the field of cancer charities. And as you can see also, positioning is of course connected to visual identity. So how do you visually stand out from the crowd as well? Now, just one tip, because this is a quite conventional example of competition, but I really like to encourage everyone to not just think about similar products or competition within a similar sector, but really check for your competition at time of use. A few years ago, I had a really interesting conversation with the head of a human rights museum. the director. And it's not easy to be a human rights museum. You know, you're not selling anything that anyone wakes up in the morning to think like, oh, let me, you know, go see a human rights exhibit. And so I asked her, who's your competition? And she said, well, we have no competition. We're the only human rights museum in town. And of course she's right, and of course she's wrong, because yes, she's the only human rights museum, but she's not in competition with other human rights museums. Her audience, her biggest audience, are families who are looking to do something on a Sunday afternoon that's educational. When it's raining outside and, you know, there's no time for it's not good weather for the beach. And so what she needs is to be positioned on the list of considerations for things to do on the Sunday afternoon that are interesting, fun for the whole family, and educational. And I think this example goes for a lot of concepts within the social impact space that would be important to consider. So if you have an unconventional product or service, or you have a conventional product, make sure to think about your most important audience and what are the considerations that they make, because you might be playing on a whole different field than you think you are. Number 3, know what matters to your audience. So this is one of the things that that I know a lot of people struggle with. Yeah, I totally understand, because creating concepts and ideas for change is a complex endeavor, and how your audience fits in isn't always so straightforward. So as I mentioned before, you know, if you're a conventional business, usually you have an insight, and it's quite straightforward to develop a brand or marketing around it. So if you're a social enterprise, I would encourage everyone to look at the formula of creating, thinking about your audiences in a different way. So yes, you have the problem in the world for which you have a product or service idea to address it. But now, once you know for who that product or service idea is the right fit, you can go back to doing audience research and really understand what are the pains in their life and what are the gains that I can create as an organization or product or service in their life, and then sell it to them in a way that matters. So for instance, if going back to the example of family planning, if overpopulation is the problem that you want to address, and you've created an app, a really cool family planning app, now let's look again at several people, for instance, in the area where you're first starting to prototype your product. What are the pains that they are experiencing in their life around family planning? That's most likely not waking up in the morning and thinking about the great global issue of overpopulation. That's most likely thinking about, you know, how safe is the pill, or other ways that people think about their family planning issues. So defining that audience, and then redefining the value proposition and selling it to them in a way that matters to them can be really crucial to help you reach these audiences. And different audiences, they work in different ways. So a woman in Nairobi obviously has different things that matter to her than a guy in Seattle when it comes to family planning. So there is not a one-size-fits-all approach to this. And I think it's really important when you're prototyping a product or service to try and start with making something very meaningful to a particular group of people that you've set as your first audience, and then trying to expand as you grow, and potentially also localize the way in which you approach your marketing, for instance. Some examples. So I'm not sure if any of you guys are familiar with a product called Fairphone. It's an incredibly courageous, amazing product created by a Dutch designer. It's already about, I think, 10 years old. it's this idea that, first of all, the minerals in our smartphones are unfairly sourced with conflict minerals, and second of all, that all these smartphones that are being created become obsolete, end up on a rubbish dump. And so he designed this idea for a modular smartphone that you can take apart, and whenever there's a better camera, replace the camera, or wherever there's a better processor, replace the processor. So what you're seeing here is a snapshot from a video, and I often use this during trainings as an example, because I think it really shows a good example of, does this matter to your particular audience? So if you're saying that the value proposition of this product is that it's designed to repair, then you're assuming that there's a huge group of people out there for whom the issue that their phone cannot be repaired is a great issue that would convince them to buy your phone over another phone. But if you would ask me, what do you think matters to people? It's not a phone that can be repaired, it's a phone that never breaks. So I think this is a good example of something where it might be good to go back to the drawing board and really look at, okay, what are some of the issues that people are experiencing around their smartphones that we're addressing, and how could we tap into really big customer pains in order to create messaging in the marketing and the branding materials that actually would appeal beyond just a very small audience of, the tinkerers and fixers that we have in the world. One of the examples that I always love is Soko, which is a jewelry brand here in Nairobi. We have a case study with an interview with two of the founders in the book, and they really impressed me with how they approached both the brand development from a communication point of view as well as the product point of view. So they started as a kind of, Etsy for Africa, so a platform where they enabled local artisans to sell their products to the rest of the world, which is really important for as a market, and also as a way to make a bigger margin on the products that they create. But what they were noticing is that when they went out there into the world with this message of, buy a piece of jewelry, empower an artisan, they were getting a few first purchases, but they weren't getting a kind of follow-up that they were looking to see, because, obviously artisans want to sell at volume in order to get to a sustainable income. So they totally shook up what they were working on. They decided to create their own line of jewelry based on contemporary jewelry styles, and through a tech platform, enable local artisans to deliver to the specifications at a really quick turnaround time. And they branded all the different materials in such a way, with the photography, with the platform, with the models, in a way that appeals to Western consumers, and they're now able to just be a fast fashion jewelry brand that's actually sourced ethically, instead of the $1 or $5 rings that you can buy there that are made somewhere in a factory. And they were very open about how they built that brand and how they managed to find the audience for them. And I think a lot of us could learn a lot about the case of Soko. Step number 4 is a solid brand framework. So if you are now the chief branding officer, then you have the responsibility of creating this brand, which is going in every which way direction. You have all these different channels. You have a product going out. You have a team of people. Like, how do you keep track of that? How do you control that? So to help people manage all those different things and make sure that the same principles are guiding the different interactions that you see on the outside, we created this thing that we call the Brand Thinking Canvas. I know what you're thinking, like, oh my God, not another canvas. I totally agree with you. I hate it myself, but here we go. We have a canvas. We've been using it for 5 years, and I think it works really good. If you're tired of canvases, please, I hear you, but give this one a go. It's really powerful. So what we looked at is what's an easy way to think about branding. It's really thinking about the human anatomy. So you have a core, which is your character, your beliefs, your personality, and then you have a brand identity, which is, you know, your skin, the way you dress, the way you sound. And then you have all the interactions. So that's the space around you where you come into contact with people. And this model works really well as an analogy for branding. So the brand thinking canvas is what you're seeing here on the screen, and it has 3 different rings. So first there's the core. This is the inside that translates to an identity, and both that internal and the identity then translate together to different interactions. These different circles cannot be taken apart. They don't stand on their own. They're interlinking vessels, so to speak, corresponding vessels. So let me take you through an example of such a canvas filled out for a brand. So I'm not sure if you guys know Sugru. Sugru is a moldable glue. It's made by an Irish inventor. Her name is Jane, and she has a very complicated Irish last name, which I won't dare to pronounce. And she realized that her product was able to fix things that otherwise were being thrown away, and she was looking for ways to actually combat the throwaway culture. Imagine that you're a brand developer and you're getting this piece of gum on your table, like, okay, help me sell this. It's probably one of the toughest brand challenges, I would say, that you would ever get if you're in the field of branding. And I think they've done a really spectacular job of creating such a silly thing as a little bit of moldable rubber to bring that to life. So this is what a model would look like, for instance, if you would be creating a brand for yourself. So we've done this analysis just to give you a sense of what you could be doing as well if you're building your own brand. So let's dive in a little bit closer and go to the core. So the purpose of this product is to get people to fix things instead of throwing them away. Their vision really guides everything. The fact that they want the world to shift from a throwaway culture to a fixing culture, where Sugru is in everyone's fix-all kitchen drawer. In order to get to that world, their mission is to help people fix things and enjoy tapping into their creative potential to solve everyday problems. So if you're just selling people moldable glue, there's going to be a moment where they don't yet know, what do I do with it? So this brand's ability to inspire people to get creative and think about, that ski boot that's rotting in the garage, or that little thing in the dishwasher that got broken, and now I have to, buy an entirely new dishwasher because there's this stupid plastic thing that can't be fixed. These are the things where people now have to think, aha, I need Sugru. What you then, so once you have that core set up and you understand, okay, these are the promises that I'm committing to make with my product. So Sugru is the first moldable glue in the world that has superpowers. It helps you put plastics, ceramics, rubbers, and other materials back together. We help reduce waste by repairing and improving products. Really simple promises that you're committing to deliver and that you're going to be disseminating through everything that you do. This inside you translate to an outside, so visual identity. And interestingly enough, very often when you do these case studies, things seem very obvious, but that's looking from kind of an advanced point, like you're further in time, so things look very obvious. When Sugru started, they didn't look like what they look like today. Nowadays, when you see their brand, you'll notice a piece of Sugru is the logo. All the different elements of the visual language are handmade. what we're seeing is photos of the product actually in action, the different things that people have fixed with Sugru that are actually contributed by their users. All their verbal identity, for instance, about a tone of voice that's fun and easy, that's really encouraging, like a cheerleader helping you to fix stuff. Really getting people to understand, aha, this product is something that I can use and I can use time and time again. And then in the outside ring, what you're seeing is that both that core, so the big vision, as well as the things that you're committing to deliver, as well as the identity, they all come together in all these different interactions. So the products, they all really, they're very sympathetic, they're playful, they look handmade, even though, you know, it's a very professional looking product. The products come with little booklets with inspiration on how to use the product. If you go into a do-it-yourself store, which I think is not the word you use in English, do-it-yourself store, but you know what I mean. You find points of sale that have all the inspiration of what you can do with it. They go to fixer fairs. They have a fixer manifesto. They have a YouTube channel that's dedicated to all these different fixes. So they have actually Jane, the inventor, her husband, creates these videos of all the things you could do with Sugru. They have a platform that instead of just showing like this is the product, buy the product, it actually shows all the different applications for Sugru. So whether it's in the kitchen, in the bathroom, for play, it's a catalog of possibilities. Now, for partnerships and collaborations, Sugru has never really invested in big brand names to be partnered with. Instead, what they've continuously done is invested in their community of fixers. And they have now twice raised millions of pounds to expand the company through crowdfunding. And I think that really speaks to how much people love the brand. And so in terms of how you can bring this brand to the outside world through, for instance, people, talent, and behavior, obviously Jane, the inventor, is a really big spokesperson for the product. And I think she gets a lot of people love her. Her husband is the same kind of goofy example of, a fixer. But they also have this huge community of fixers that are a part of the community. So if there's any way that you could think about building communities around what you're creating, I think Sugru is a really great example to look at. So now as a chief branding officer, you have created this canvas for yourself, right? You have all these different avenues. Yeah, you are human. You have only a limited amount of hours in a week, a limited amount of money in the bank. What are you going to focus on? And I think this is a long-term responsibility to keep in mind that it's always going to be your role to find the most effective and efficient channels to grow your brand. So you have, basically, we define 6 categories of interactions, and being able to kind of keep track of what you're doing for in each of these 6 is really important. And I want to give you an example from my own practice in the past few years that I think really speaks to this. So I was working as an interim brand manager for a small social tech company. And I was with them 1 day a week. That was what we had budget for, and no budget for external cost, unfortunately. So we thought about the first product that we were launching, and we realized, like, wow, we don't have money. So what we're going to do is we're going to really invest in pitching to reputable partners, because they already have huge audiences, and they're going to help us to promote this product that's coming out. So myself and the leadership team, we probably invested about 200 hours pitching to different organizations. We ended up with 6 really big name partners who then helped us to spread the word about the product. So this felt great. And on the day of the launch, we decided, well, why don't we just scrape together a couple of $100 as well to do some social ads to see what works. And actually, interestingly enough, what we found in the next 8 months was that by keeping track really diligently of our digital marketing and where leads were going and getting the input from our different partners, we realized that the vast majority of active users were actually coming in through our own targeted social ads instead of through the partners. I think this is something that really opened my eyes not just to the fact that sometimes it's better to just spend the money instead of spending the time, but also to the fact that if we didn't diligently keep track of all the different things that we were trying and what was the investment in time and money and what was the outcome, then it's very easy to see your year just kind of slip through your hands and not really be able to grasp like, hey, what can I do that really makes a difference? So from my experience, that kind of, the ability to keep a journal, if you will, of all the different things that you're investing in and really getting an understanding of what works and then doubling down on the things that work is a really great tip that I would love to share from my experience. So what are the signs that all this hard work in branding are actually paying off? So there's a few. Obviously, again, it would be great if you see, people choosing you over others. That's the obvious first one. But I would say first, like the basics. If you speak to someone and they know you and they know what your offer is, that's great. It's even better if they can recall some of the benefits of the product or service or idea that you're promoting. It's great if people have an unreasonable preference for you over others. So that's not just, if you're, a sustainably produced fair trade lemonade on the shelf in the supermarket. That's also the case if you're, for instance, in education and someone making a major decision on an educational program and, they've been following you and they love what you're doing and they see your name in a list and they just have an unreasonable preference for you over others, even though you might not have necessarily better papers than other people. It's also a great sign if reputable established names want to be seen with you as a partner. So the fact that someone with a big name is willing to put their logo next to yours for an event, is willing to send out the word on your behalf, those are all really good signs. And also people willing to be your ambassador. The case study for Yoni, which is in the book, the founder also came to one of our live events to speak in Amsterdam. And Yoni is a feminine hygiene product, basically organic tampons. And they get people who email them who say, what can I do to help spread the word about your tampons? And I can assure you that's not an email that many tampon companies in the world get. So having a strong brand really does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. And last but not least, I think, again, like if you're going to create change, you're going to do that by working with really awesome people. And if you're seeing that job applicants, for instance, are starting to cite the brand as a reason to apply, you're on a good track. So Macmillan, for instance, 2 years after the rebranding, made sure that in their HR process, the question of, why are you applying with us was in the application process. They heard that 52% of the applicants were citing the brand as a reason to apply, which is amazing. It's not the end all of everything, of course, but if this is what your investment actually end up doing, which is building an amazing culture, work culture, and getting amazing talent in, then it's been really good use of your time and money. Now, I imagine a lot of you in this group actually have great tips and experiences yourself. I am, of course, in this situation asked to talk about this topic, but I've also seen a couple of people who I know are extremely knowledgeable on this topic as well, present here. So definitely feel free to present yourself in the chats as well if you have tips, ideas, websites you want people to visit. make yourself heard, because I'd love to hear what you're working on, and that would be it'd be great to share these ideas with you. So branding is not for one time. It's something that you're doing all the time. You know, by the time you feel like you've gotten a grasp of implementing that foundation that you've created, now there'll be a chance to refresh. So see the brand building process as an everyday thing that needs to involve your entire team. And I wanted to get back to that topic of money, because I think this is really crucial. The way people talk about investment in branding is so crucial to the kind of effect that you can help create. So, like I said before, there's a lot of effort that people put into creating a great product or service for change. And then there's very often at the end of that process, there's this little sliver of time and money reserved for finding the audience. And that's a shame, because I think if we instead looked at this entirely different and say, we're going to invest as much time and as much money in building a great product as we are in finding and growing that audience, I think that's a great way of approaching building products for change. Because if you're not finding that audience, the idea for change is never going to happen. So being able to align product development with brand development, and not thinking of branding and marketing as something that comes in at the end, you know, that really we should reserve some money for, but we don't really want to because we should be putting the money in the product. We need to think about that entirely different. So my tip for you, if any of you, for those 25% of you who are on this call who are still in the idea stage or in the startup stage, like integrating brand development with product development and using these different points in the process. For instance, you're doing user or client research. That's also an opportunity to actually reach out and treat them as a brand audience and already learn as much as you can for your branding and marketing process there as well. If you're working on defining the product, that's also the moment to start engaging people in conversations about the clarity of how you're presenting that product or service to the world. If you're testing the product, now is also the moment to test how you describe it, what value it offers, potentially all kinds of ways of presenting it. So don't see it as the process that comes at the end, but see it as an integrated process. I think it will pay off in terms of how much time and money you invest in the process. Of course, there's 1,000 things about branding that are really crucial, and we talk about this a lot in the trainings. And I think there's a few things that I want to make sure that you know before we start a Q&A. What's really crucial but often overlooked is trademarking and brand architecture. So trademark is the legal protection of your brand. A trademarking conflict can put you out of business. So please, please, please take trademarking seriously. It costs a couple of $100 sometimes, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on where you live, but really it can put you out of business. So please make sure that you get that stuff right. We have an essay on it from a trademarking lawyer in the book. Another crucial thing, brand architecture. So that's the management of different products or services within your company. So what I often see people in the social sector do is they create new brands for new products, new labels, new things, but they never have enough capacity to actually feed all of those different little brands. So before making the step to create a new brand or a new label for something, please, please, please consider the consequences. We have a tool in the book to help you with that. We also describe the process from A to Z. So the 5 points that I've just mentioned, they are one of 23 steps that we talk about in the book. And then we have lots of tools and exercises to help you to do exactly what we've just talked about in the talk. 14 case studies across different sectors in different countries, and all in all, lots of tips and tricks on briefing creatives and setting a budget and how you get PR and what's all that stuff I hear about digital marketing. So Danielle has already shared the Canvas link for you. So we're giving you the big poster version of our Canvas through this discount code. It's available in English, German, Spanish, Portuguese, Arabic, and French. I really recommend using this tool for anyone who's building a brand. It's such a helpful foundation for everything that you're building. It will really help you to stay sane in the process of creating your idea for change. There's also plenty of ways to get involved with what I'm doing. We have an online community, so some of you are, sharing your stories here in chat is really cool to see what you're working on. You're also very welcome to share some of these challenges in the Facebook group. So that's facebook.com groups Brand the Change. We have events and meetups currently in Amsterdam, Lisbon, and Nairobi. You can go to our website. If you're in that region, you're super welcome to attend an event. Some of those events are recorded, and you can find them on YouTube if you're searching for Brand the Change Live. And then if you are a creative or a brand professional and you're looking at this and you're like, oh, this is amazing, I want to use these tools in my professional practice, great. Like, we need all the allies we can get. So we have several ways of doing that. You can, on the website, you can find information under the Get Involved button on navigation. That's it from my end. I did a lot of talking, and I'm excited to go to Q&A and see if any of you have any questions, comments, anything you want to share.
Yes, wow. Thank you so much, Anne. That was an amazing, distilled and very clear presentation. So we can all tell that you know your stuff in terms of starting with the clear what, and sharing all the examples and stories just makes it so relevant and easy to process. So appreciate you preparing that for us. I know people in the chat were throwing in lots of comments and questions, but a very general consensus that we appreciate the information. So thanks for that. So everybody, I have been gathering some of the questions, but if you have more, please put them in the chat now. And if you mark the little dot on the right of your question with a red Q, that will help make sure we see them. And I have put up the link to the brand canvas, Brand the Change Canvas, sorry, Brand Thinking Canvas. So you guys can click on that link and it will go directly to the canvas. And thank you, Anne, for that generous offer to share that with everybody here. So let's start off with a few questions while people are adding more into the chat. One that was a theme that came up a few times when you were talking about step one and those clear what statements is, how do you simplify your what if you have multiple audiences? So if you have multiple services or value propositions for different audiences, how do you tackle that step in that case?
Yeah. This can be, if you have multiple audiences and multiple services for different audiences, I think what you can do is the following. So you probably have, for all those different audiences and services, you have one big vision. So having one really strong why that connects all those different audiences and all those different services together, I think is really important. But then the ability to actually offer different propositions, so different offers to those different audiences. You can look at whether those audiences always come in through the same channels, for instance. So if you're thinking, for instance, of your website as a product catalog where everyone's coming in, then that's where you can start to organize things, obviously, in such a way that people understand how to filter through your information. But what you often also see when it comes to social change is that your different audiences actually are not in the same category. So, for instance, take the family planning app that I was talking about before. So that's an example of a company that I've worked with here in Kenya. They have impact investors that are based in the US. They have team members from highly educated team members here in Kenya that they need to attract. They have, for instance, an audience of low-income communities, mostly women, between about 14 and 38 years old. And actually, those audiences naturally all use different channels. So what you could do is, for instance, the impact investors will mostly, you'll be talking with them potentially through, maybe they'll be checking out your website, but you'll be speaking to them mostly through pitches, right? And so you need to make sure that your pitch, your big vision is the big vision that everyone knows about. But the product and the value proposition is obviously highly tuned to the needs that these impact investors have. Now, if you're talking about the audience in Kenya, like the team members that you're looking to recruit, that's probably going to be through the channels of universities. You might be looking at either Twitter or Facebook as a channel. And so you can talk about the offer that you have for them, for instance, an amazing job, through channels that matter to that particular audience. If you're talking about women between 16 and 35 in low income communities, then one of the channels that you might be using is you want to advance word of mouth. So women sharing this information among women, and so using some kind of technique through SMS-based referrals, or doing community events in informal settlements here. So again, understanding that within the big picture, there are several different groups and several different channels that you could be using. Could be one way of looking at that.
Excellent, thanks. I know that's a big question too to tackle in a Q&A, but I think it helps give people a starting point. Davina has a question. I'm going to try a feature here and see if it works to broadcast the comment. I'm not sure if you guys can see, but it just helps us keep an eye on the question. So Davina says, I wonder if the process is similar when the brand is selling an idea or promoting desired actions. So for example, in the fisheries space, and that came in when, again, we were talking about the what and the why. So the products might be a little bit easier to have a very clear what. When we're talking about ideas, how do we distill that into something concrete?
Yeah, so I think if you're promoting desired actions, so for instance, behavioral change, I think when we talk about brand, what I would focus on is building the brand around the organization or the entity that is sending out this request for desired actions. Whereas the process of getting people to change, to take those actions, I would consider more of a campaign. For instance, if you're Dr. Ayana Johnson, there is one overall theme, again, that you want to be recognized for. So you want to be recognized as, for instance, I'm not saying this on her behalf, just I'm fictionally or just using my imagination. Say she wants to be recognized as the marine biologist who's, on the side of policymakers and fishermen to create conservation policies that work for all the different parties involved. You want to build that reputation through for instance, the process that I've just explained. But then if Dr. Johnson would need people to actually say yes to a particular set of actions or to change their behavior or their mindsets about a particular thing, I would consider that the ideas that you would put out there through a process of a campaign, whether or not it needs to, be a very traditional campaign like you imagine with posters and signatures, etc., or something more unconventional. I would leave to someone else to decide. But yeah, it's a good point. I don't think they are necessarily the same process. I do think that sometimes ideas require a particular frame. So, for instance, I was working with a co-working and co-living organization recently, and they realized that they needed an entirely different way of describing what they were doing. And so they created a new frame around the idea that they had, and that's having that kind of brand thinking process around their idea really helped to clarify the concept. So even though they didn't go through all the 5 steps, creating the brand framework helped them to articulate what the idea was to begin with.
Great, thank you. We have another question from Kristen. Let me broadcast it again. So if you work at an organization where you have a fluffy what, how do you go about convincing the organization that this is a problem they need to fix today? So kind of becoming that brand strategist champion in an organization and getting the whole team on board. There was a few questions around this idea.
Yeah, great one. So I've often heard founders and co-founders complain about how many demands there are on their time. It's incredibly tiring for them to have to explain time and time and time again to people what it is that they do. So if you're working in an organization where you can find out that the founders are just sort of drained by the energy it takes to get to even the point of being considered, because the what just isn't very clear, then you can tap into that personal pain sometimes. So I've had a bit of success with that in the past, where I was working with a founder who just kept sending, really long emails to explain to people what the concept were that they were asking support on. And we invested a couple of $1,000s into creating, first of all, that really clear what, but then also a short video that explained basically in 2 minutes, so that now he could send out an email saying like, okay, this is who we are, this is what we do. If you want more information, check out this video. And he was immediately incredibly relieved. So I think if you can find some of the human motivations behind the pain that a fluffy what can cause, that might be a nice inroad to getting people to support your efforts to prioritize it.
Excellent, thanks, Anne. So there's a couple questions coming about downloading the slides, and just to let you know, you will get a link to the replay, the full recording, the video by email, but we're not sending the slides out specifically, but you still have access to all the information via video. And the link to the Brand Thinking Canvas plus Anne's Facebook group are all going to be in that email as well, because a few people are navigating the links and finding these resources. So just want to clarify that for everybody while we look at the next question. So let's see. Gerson asks, how can we tap talent to institute brand thinking? So maybe that's a bit of an overlap with the last question, but do you have other ideas about mobilizing time and talent around these branding goals?
I'm not sure if I understand exactly the question. So I would read it 2 ways. So is it about getting more talent on board to conduct brand thinking inside an institute? Or, sorry, maybe I'm not following.
I think it's to apply, but Gerson, maybe you can, let's table this question, and if you're still here, if you can clarify exactly what you mean by that, we'll come back to it.
Sorry, Gerson. I'm sure it's a super intelligent question, and I'm just being blonde about it.
It's good to get more info. Now,
I saw one question also about why not first the why, about the investors. I think that's an important one maybe to
sure, yes, let's answer that one.
Address. So I saw a comment like, why first the what and not first the why? Because why is important for investors. I'm not saying that why isn't important. I'm absolutely saying that if you don't have a purpose, you're lost. What I'm saying is that very often people have a great purpose, but they don't have a good definition of the product or service that they're offering. So in all of the 1,400 people that I've worked with, I found that purpose generally isn't the issue. So I would say maybe step 0 is define your purpose if you don't have it yet. But most people, they actually do have that. So they have a pretty good vision for the future. Therefore, I think in all of the voices that are always going out there in the world saying, you need to do your why, you need to do your why, you need to do your why, I would actually say, no, let me just make a little bit of a counter argument of like, okay, yes, why is super important, but don't forget your what. Because an investor, of course, yes, they invest in your vision, but if they don't understand what the vehicle of that vision is going to be, they're not going to invest in you. And you're also assuming that because the purpose is a thing that's very interesting for social impact investors, for instance. But if you have a really strong product or service, you don't have to limit yourself to just impact investment. You could also go for different types of investment. So I think the statement of first taking care of your what mostly comes out of my observation that this is something that I think as a sector we could really spend a little bit more of attention on.
Okay, great. Gerson did clarify applying talent, but I just want to get a little more info from him about within an existing team or bringing in outside support, because I think that might change the answer a little bit. So let's look at, Anne has a question in the meantime. I'm wondering how to approach this with a team who tends to act, make, and deals, have conversations that continually skew from our branding and confuse both internally and externally. So how can you get your team to listen and implement and stay on brand? And I think you talked about that a little bit, but does that bring up any other thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is so common, and I'm so happy someone brings this up, because obviously, a brand can only work if your entire team is involved in it and if they're aligned on it. And I think the first thing to do is to get especially a leadership team together to make sure that this issue is clear and on the table, and to talk about what effect that the constant flip-flopping has. First of all, if everyone's aware of that, and second of all, what it has. And then, for instance, a canvas like the one I presented just now is also a really great tool to actually get together and to say, let's create this canvas with the leadership team. And as a leadership team, we're going to decide to put our signature underneath this thing that we're actually going to commit to stay on this plan. Now, I know that's a lot easier said than done. I don't believe in fairy tales, and I've been in workshops, for instance, with five founders, which is quite rare, but an organization with 5 founders who had radical different visions, radically different ideas of where they wanted to go, and that's just, that can be really tough. So I don't have the magic solution for it, but I do think that having creating a canvas together helps to effectively also put all the different options on the table and have people make decisions on them in order to get to some kind of consensus. I also could recommend the book Living the Brand by Nicholas Int. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's a really great book by, I believe, a Swedish marketing guy who talks about how bigger organizations deal with living that brand in every different aspect of organization. And I've seen really good tips in that book as well, so you might want to pick that one up.
Excellent. So we have tons of questions. We won't be able to get to them all, but I'd like to wrap up with 2 more, and we are very close to the 90 minutes, but the time flew by. We have one, so Gerson did clarify applying talent outside support. So bringing in resources, advisors, and professionals like yourself, I would imagine. How do we help mobilize that within an organization?
I think as any profession, there's lots of people out there who are really, really eager and interested in making a difference in the world. So there's a lot of people in the branding space who are putting their time and skills and effort into supporting social enterprises. I think the key is something that, of course, we're also working on is growing that community and getting the word out there. So if you're interested, Gersten, go to the Facebook group. You'll find at least half of the people in that group are people within the branding space. So you're already going to find a little bit of support there. I also think that it's important to build long-term relationships. So what we often see is that, especially if you have small budgets, you tend to kind of puzzle together little bits of work over time. But if there is, for instance, a local organization that you have, either a designers organization or a community of brand strategists, that where you can find one person who really, connects to what you do, and build a long-term relationship to them. So they not just offer support for you, but also have some accountability in terms of the work that they're doing with you long-term. I think that's definitely something that I can recommend. I've heard of, very interesting ways of people finding each other. I know, even Macmillan Cancer Support, they're a huge organization, but they didn't know any branding people, didn't know who to select, and they just did a phone call to the UK Advertising Council, I think, and they worked with them, for instance, to create a briefing. So you never know. There's multiple avenues to get people involved, and certainly through the book that I've written, I've been able to get a lot of amazing brand professionals to stand up and say, like, hey, I feel exactly the same as you. This book is like, my the story of my life. So I know they're out there. So do a call for support on the Facebook group, and I'm sure you'll find lots of people are willing to help you.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, and final question, because Nash has been very patient and posted it a few times. And this is, can a brand strategy work for traditional nonprofit organizations? We usually speak about communications and visibility in the traditional nonprofits. How does this sync with brand thinking?
Yeah, that's a really, I think what you're describing, I recognize a lot. I see that here in Kenya, and also back in my home country in the Netherlands, where traditional nonprofits, they have all of their activities and everything that they do, and then they have the communication and visibility, kind of, a few desks in the office of people who then are sending out the work. I think brand thinking is really something that needs to happen, not just in the communication department, but it needs to happen at the leadership level. So if you're able to get different members of the leadership team to actually use some of this methodology, and really be willing also to take a different look at their organization, to have that outsider's look, and to think about who are the different stakeholders that they are supported by and that they're looking to support, and how they would be impacted if you, for instance, would take a stronger positioning, if you would change some of the actions that you're taking on. I think that could be really extremely refreshing, because what we're also seeing is that a lot of funding for traditional nonprofits is drying up. Governments are funding less and less. Donors are moving towards more of a social enterprise form. And so I think it's actually very important that nonprofits take on a more user-focused approach, and brand thinking can really help you do that. So I would highly recommend maybe doing half a day with a leadership team and seeing if you get them to understand why it could be beneficial for them to take on an approach like brand thinking.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for all of that amazing information. We have shared the links in a few different places, so I hope that everybody finds what they need. And again, it will be shared, the brand thinking canvas, the Facebook group, your website, which has the book available very clearly, and the recording. So that will all come to you by email. And as a final wrap up before we sign off, I just wanted to let everybody know that yesterday in Plus Acumen land, we actually shared a new course set bundle of our masterclasses. And this week it's 80% off. It's all around startup essentials. So I popped the message into the chat for you guys, but it's all with Dan Pink on the art of selling. We have Debbie Millman talking about branding, which is why I wanted to mention it today. Mahir Desai on demystifying finance, and Sarah Robb O'Hagan on competitive advantage. So that is available this week at 80% off. And the link to that and more information is also in your follow-up email. But that's it for us today. And thanks again so much for spending all of this time and sharing so much information. I really appreciate how deep you went in these concepts and kept them very clear and actionable. And I know that everybody here really enjoyed it. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Danielle. And thanks everyone for joining us. I really appreciate all your questions as well. Amazing audience. And I hope to connect to you in some other way outside of this forum as well.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. We'll sign off now.